GeoGraphy project began as a discussion about how to bring together the activities of creativity and commerce with the community of the Sunshine Coast. To do this, 5 artists, Leah Barclay, Stephen Lang, Judy Barras, Lyndon Davis and Sue Davis, were commissioned. Their task was to interpret and bring together the 3 C's. Over 7 months, the project partners, the Sunshine Coast Council and Queensland Writers Centre, collaborated to encourage, support and present the work of the artists. There were workshops, interviews, recordings, all exploring what the Sunshine Coast community thought about itself. The word neo-geography means using new media and new thinking to explore people's sense of place. And this is what the artists were asked to do.
The place that we're situated right now and behind me, this is the area in which we used to have the most ancient gatherings in the world. Centred around one of the most sacred trees in our district, we call the bunya tree, a bunya tree, and sacred to us because it only grew in this particular region of Australia and the whole of Australia. It only grew in this particular area here, the Sunshine Coast. I had the opportunity to do some culture in the schools, and I suppose it's been my sort of journey and helping bring that knowledge back to the people in the area. I feel that that's my responsibility because it was an icon for us mob, you know, all us mob here. You talk about bunya, man, that's us, you know, the bunya people, that's us, we're bunya people and we're the custodians of the bunya. You know, if we keep on passing on that knowledge, sharing it from the ancient people and passing it through us fellas now, the descendants, well, you know, then hopefully that that story, the legends and people will share the same connection as our ancestors did. And I don't mean just for a little while, I mean for thousands of years, yeah, living here, connected to this bunya.
Well, the first thing I did was think about what people needed, and they needed access to resources. There was a lot of information out there about how we were all going to change our reading habits and everybody was going to be in e-books. And you have to remember this is before the iPad was even released. So, you know, in a year a lot has changed and a lot of what was being said has come to fruition. But people who were writing things and who wanted to get a message across didn't quite know how to use digital technology. So basically what I did to begin with was set up a resource site with lots of links and just very, very basic information about what's an e-book, what's a virtual book, how would you go about making one, how do you use, where's page turning software, where can I find it, what's free, where can I go to for help. So that site became the sort of basis for my project. It's called alternativepublishing.info. And then I held a series of workshops introducing people to some really, really basic ideas about publishing. And I based those workshops on zines, which have been around for, you know, a century or so, and chapbooks, which are really the grassroots of publishing there, about how people can get their ideas out cheaply, easily, publish it themselves. I was interested in the idea that people have access to a lot of information in the digital era, but they may feel that they've lost their voice, that they can't get their message out. So I wanted to let ordinary people know some of the ways they might use technology to get their message across, say whatever they want to say.
My project is quite multi-platform in nature, in that it's really about engaging the community in sound and getting people to understand sound and digital technologies, and really creating a series of projects which inspires the community to listen and understand stories of the community. So I'm delivering this in a number of ways with a digital orchestra, which is using iPads and iPhones to create improvised music, which we can then stream to various communities around the world. And I'm doing a series of community engagement workshops with digital technologies and just getting people to understand how they can interact with sound. And I'm also creating a new version of Sonic Babylon at the Koroi Library. Sonic Babylon is a digital project which uses Wi-Fi clouds to plant gardens of sound, and people can interact with these gardens of sound and upload their own sounds, download sounds and mix the sounds in real time to create their own sound gardens. So with that actual process of generating those sounds, I'm working with a lot of local community members and basically finding stories that are very relevant to this community, that we can then create soundscapes that can be disseminated across the world and give people a better understanding of what it means to live on the Sunshine Coast and what the Sunshine Coast community is all about.
My project is it has the title of Real Estate Dreaming. And this comes about, the title sums up in a way what I'm interested in, which is the relationship that modern people have with landscape or with the land they live in. The rate of change that we're seeing in this region is really quite unprecedented, and nobody seems to have a handle on quite what it means, or in fact what the Sunshine Coast is, how we define the Sunshine Coast as a place in itself. There seems to be a great lack of understanding of that. I'm not saying that I have an answer, but what I'm interested in doing is asking some questions and seeing what other people have to say. I'm trying to find what some other people think about this and trying to write a series of articles about it that will be published in local press or maybe in national press.
My GeoGraphy projects have a couple of different components. So one of them is about using place stories, which is both a web interface and also a software program created by Feral Arts, and it allows community members to actually tell their own stories. Part of the reason I was interested in that is about providing a voice for people through different creative means. The second component of my workshops, I'm doing some children's workshops after school, and they are open to 10 to 15-year-olds, and we're using, it's not really claymation, but they're making plasticine characters and then telling the stories through digital storytelling. The third component of my project, I guess, was something to do for myself creatively. And so what I was interested in is some of the seminal sort of journeys and stories on the Sunshine Coast. And one of those is the story of Eliza Fraser, who's probably the first white woman to ever walk on this land. So I was interested in exploring that story. And so I've been using a blog at the moment just to explore that character, but with the next stage of that, I'm looking at working with some of the other geographers and also other artists in the community to actually shape that into some kind of performative piece. So if you want to be a successful writer or an artist or producer or whatever, you've got to have the contacts in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne or internationally to actually reach that wider market to be able to make it pay. So I think that's where those partnerships, both internal to the region and external, are really important to any kind of growth in creative industries and digital economies in the future.
The artistic process naturally evolved into distinct stages: meetings and inspiration, quiet work time, the showcase, and then what happens from here. On November 4, 2010, the showcase brought alive the Karoi Mill Place precinct with performance, projections and sound gardens, and of course stories of the Sunshine Coast. Throughout the project, the artists learned, collaborated, created and worked with the community to define what makes the Sunshine Coast home, and it still hasn't finished yet. The project has shown that there are significant opportunities for creative workers as the nexus between creativity, commerce and culture evolves on the Sunshine Coast.